How to Sell a Haunted House, the newest thriller from horror fan favorite Grady Hendrix, is the story of Louise and Mark Joyner, whose parents unexpectedly die in a car accident. Their already contentious sibling relationship is put to the test when they have to sell the family home, which is packed to the rafters with dolls and puppets their mother collected. And some of those toys, especially a clown puppet named Pupkin, are not so nice. Maybe even what you might call murderous. Hello and welcome to The Best Book Ever, the podcast where we get to know interesting people by asking them about their favorite book. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and my friends, I was feeling a little too comfortable lately, like I was getting a little too relaxed in my reading life. So I decided to invite back the queen of terrifying books, my friend Chelsea Hofman. Chelsea runs the Thrillers by the Book Club and is the co-host of Thrillers by the Book Club podcast. Bookworms, I think of all of my guests I've ever had on this show, Chelsea and I probably have the most polar opposite taste in books. And that's why it is always a blast talking to her. I'm convinced she wanted to terrify me when she showed up today to talk about why How to Sell a Haunted House is the best book ever. Hi, Chelsea. Welcome back to The Best Book Ever.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here again.
Listen, we're good enough friends now that I can speak honestly, right?
Yeah.
I can. Let me just ask you a question. Why the fuck do you hate me?
It's not that I hate you. I just want you to grow your horizons to be truly terrified when you go to sleep. I really don't think that's asking for too much. I just want you to be petrified.
Why is it fun to be terrified? Explain this to me.
Psychologically. Let's go back to no, I'm just kidding. I just think that people like to be scared. People like to be surprised deep down, that's why people like surprise parties. That's why people like not knowing the ending of things, because you like to be surprised. That's my theory. I think you need a little mystery in life. Even if it's scary, you need a little mystery.
And you don't like normal surprises are not interesting to you, because you've told me many times, you're not interested in romances. You're not interested in lit fic, which those are the types of mysteries that are good for my soul.
Those are not surprising. When is there not a happy ending in a romance book?
No, that's true. That's
not a surprise. You're no matter what happens, I know in the end they're going to be together, and that's how it ends. So there's no surprise. Despite the small problem that they'll encounter, oh no, we have this tiny little issue where maybe we can't be together for 3 months. In the end, they're going to be together. So it's is that a surprise? It is not.
It is not.
If someone gets decapitated, that's a huge surprise.
So you would only read a romance if the happily ever after meant someone was decapitated.
Even so, it's do I want them to be happy? Not really, because that's not real life. That's the thing, is that my problem with romance is it's so aspirational that it makes you feel bad about your life. It's yes, everything works out great and, everyone's happy in the end, but that's not reality. People aren't happy in the end. In the end, there's still going to be problems that you choose to be happy, but it doesn't all work out perfectly. And so that's my problem with romance, is that it works out perfectly.
So is that the appeal of horror and thriller, is that you're reading it and you're well, at least dolls aren't chasing me around my house?
Yes.
So
yes,
you're happy about your life then?
Right. At least a terrifying doll isn't shoving a needle in my eye. At least. I at least have that.
Okay. I never thought of it like that, but when you put it that way, it is a great point. I did walk around my house going, there are no dolls trying to kill me in this house. My life's actually pretty good.
Right. Instead of being oh man, this girl met a millionaire and he somehow loved her even though she was poor. And now they're together and she can have a private chef and live in a mansion in England. When's that going to happen to me? Never. Never.
I mean, I can't argue with any of your points. You are obviously correct about all of this.
I know.
So let's tell our listeners about what you do. I know you from our local chapter of the Thrillers by the Book Club.
Yes.
Will you tell our listeners about that group and about your podcast?
I will. So yes. So I started Thrillers by the Book Club a couple years ago as a digital book club on Instagram and on the book club's app platform. And it was to bring people together to talk about thrillers because there's like zero thriller book clubs, or at least there was no thriller book clubs that were widely distributed that I knew about. So I started it on Instagram, and then it transitioned into in-person groups. So there's like 40 different groups that meet all over the country, including the SoCal one, which was the first one, how we met. And that was actually Yolanda, my co-host's whole idea. She was like, why don't you do it in person? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so right. Why don't I do it in person? Because I hate doing extra work, but it's totally worth it. So we started in person with like 6 people. Now there's 20 of us, as you know. And then we decided to create a podcast. So my co-host Olivia reached out to me. I have never met her one time. Like, I did not know her. And she was like, you should have a podcast. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, I'll do it with you. And I'm like, even better. Because again, trying to do less work for, I don't have all the free time. So she's like, yeah, let's just do it. And so we did it. We started a thriller podcast that each episode is like, we wanted to feel kind of book clubbish. So we have a lot of chats at the beginning where we're just talking about our life. Then we each choose a book, talk about a thriller book each, and kind of discuss it without spoilers. So thriller lovers can listen and feel like they're part of the book club.
And do you and Olivia, who is actually a future guest on this show, do you generally agree on thrillers, or do you have different favorite subgenres?
We have the same favorite subgenre, which is psychological thrillers, but we don't always agree. I think she's an author and she writes. And so she sees things in a different way than I do. I'm really a consumer. So I see it as the reader. So I'm looking at it as just reading the book and having my reaction. And I think she's a lot more forgiving because she's a writer and she knows the process that writers go through and how much work. Like, I appreciate that, but I definitely read so many thrillers that it's really easy for me to be like, this is what I like. This is what I didn't like. But yeah, we agree for the most part. If we don't agree, it's a good conversation.
How do you generally find your next book?
I get a lot of people reaching out to me, pitching their book and being like, can you read this? Authors. Yeah. Also publishers. So I'm on a lot of we just did a podcast episode about how to get ARCs. So I highly recommend people listen to that if they want to get free books.
I'll link to it in the show notes.
Yes. It's a good one because it explains pretty much how I got started like this, which is getting on publishers' influencer lists and getting books from them. So I get sent quite a few books a month, and that's usually what I choose from. But I'm also interested in like my favorite authors. So for example, I know Riley Sager's coming out with a new book. So I will reach out to his publicist and be like, I need this book immediately. So it really depends. But a lot of them are just from influencer lists, from people pitching me and sending me books. And then I'm like, this actually looks really good. Or looking on NetGalley or Goodreads and kind of just looking around to see what's out there.
When you're in this world of getting advanced copies and, being part of the book influencer world, which you are, do you have the time to just go for a bookstore wander and look for backlist books or anything like that? Or are you always looking forward to what's next?
I try to read what I like. And so if there's something, like if I see an author that I really like Catherine Ryan Howard, right? So I read The Nothing Man, loved it. So I went out and bought every single one of her backlist books and read them all. Because if it's someone I love, I want to support them and I want to read all their work. But backlist books I probably read like 1 or 2 a month, and it's really the majority is going to be upcoming books for review and promotion because that's what people are excited about. But I try to read backlist if there's something I really like, or if there's something that I feel like I missed, then I'll try to make time to at least read 1 per month.
You have an incredible memory too. I've noticed this while we are in book club together, is that you have such a great recall, especially considering how much you read. And this is something that I am terrible at. Is I have to actually get it back in my hands and go, oh, yeah, I did read this one.
That's what makes a good book to me, is if it sticks out and if it doesn't blend in. So even we were talking about how romance is very formulaic, but also thrillers are very formulaic. And sometimes they're all exactly the same, and that's hard to differentiate and remember and really get passionate about if they're exactly the same as every other book. So I think if something is different and unique, that makes me a lot more excited about it, or if I'm surprised in the end, which pretty much never happens.
Now, I feel like this book very much does not follow the formula, which is what. So let's get into this one. So was this one of the ones that you got as an advance reader copy? How did you find this book, How to Sell a Haunted House?
Yes. So I love Grady Hendrix, and I've read a few of his books, including the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I also really loved Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. So anyway, I love all his books, and they're all very different. Like, they're all set in different times. Some are supernatural, some are not supernatural. Like the Final Girl Support Group, which I chose for our Thrillers by the Book Club, it's not supernatural. So anyway, I love his books. So when I saw that How to Sell a Haunted House was coming out, I immediately reached out to the publicist and was like, I need this book.
Why don't you tell our listeners what this book is about?
How to Sell a Haunted House is family, so siblings, Louise and Mark Joyner, and their parents are found, they have a car crash. So they're fleeing their house in the middle of the night. They have a car crash where they're killed, and now Louise and Mark need to sell their house, which is haunted. Spoiler in the title. And their mother collected puppets. So trigger warning for people who are terrified by puppets. Sorry.
Which should be everyone.
I know. I agree. And the worst part is he's a clown puppet. Like a clown puppet. Talk about triggering. The scariest type of puppet, freaking Pumpkin. We'll talk about him. He haunts my nightmares. So that this house is full with a ton of dolls and puppets, and both Mark and Louise have a horrible, terrifying history with Pumpkin, which is like her favorite puppet. And he was part of their childhood, and in their childhood, they're like, oh, he seems like he's real. Does he have a life of his own? Yes, he does. He has a life of his own. Puppet is possessed. Pumpkin is terrifying. Hate him. So yeah, that's what the book's about. They're trying to sell this house while this demonic puppet is possessing them and trying to stab them in the eye with a needle. And it is freaky. Is that a good explanation?
So...
Sorry.
This is perfect. So tell me why you like this insane book so much.
I'm so happy you asked. So I love horror that is written in a funny way. So Grady Hendrix writes horror in a hilarious way, which, like, of course, you wouldn't think that a possessed puppet would be funny. It's kind of funny. I felt like I was going to throw up, but also laughing, and also like crying and terrified, but also like puppets. So it was a wide range of emotions. But for me, I love books that have like an undercurrent of meaning. And this book had that undercurrent of meaning. So it talked a lot about how we're controlled by our childhoods, how our past like informs our future, how, you know, how we grew up really affects the way that we live our life now, and how memories are subjective and things aren't always as we think they are. So I have my degree in counseling and in therapy. And so it was really interesting to see how memories were written about in this book. And I felt like it was very similar to real life, where your memories are not always exactly how they are, but they really impact your life and your current life right now. So that was really cool, talking about grief and trauma, about their parents dying, but also, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but the way that it ended, I thought was really good. I didn't expect that ending, because it was scary, but it was also sad, and it was also emotional, where you're like, man, there's a lot going on in here besides just a freaky puppet trying to murder you.
No, that's, and I fully intended to skim over a lot of this book, because as soon as I saw the blurb, I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is insane. She's just trying to hurt me. And I just thought, as soon as it gets too much, we're just going to stop. And I'm just going to tell her, I can't read.
That's fair.
And okay, to be fair, I listened during the day. And oh, by the way, I listened to this one on audio, and the narrator does the freaking puppet voice. And I don't know if you noticed reading it, but when you hear it in audio, the puppet talks a lot in this. Oh,
ew.
So I only listened during the day, and I was intentionally like doing things that are soothing. Like I was working on a little cross stitch and I was making cookies and I was like, I'm going to do only gentle things while I'm listening to this terror. But you are so right that it is genuinely funny. That funeral scene with all the puppeteers was one of the funniest things I've ever read. Like, who would think a funeral scene would be so funny? But it was so absurd and wonderful and charming and sad and bizarre. And I kept going, what the hell kind of book is this? I feel weird laughing, but I think he wants me to laugh at this.
Yes, absolutely.
It's so good.
It's so good. He just writes about all these emotions in such an interesting way. And I mean, I can't even imagine what his mind is like. It's totally warped, but I loved it.
We definitely can't lean into the spoilers or the end of it, but I cannot quite get over the ending. It did not go where I thought I was going to go. Yeah. And when it all resolves, I didn't have the feelings I thought I was going to have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting.
Can't say more.
In a way, you empathize with the puppet, which is I hated you this whole time. And now I'm like, oh, I feel a little, I still want him to be murdered and burned alive, but you're kind of like, oh, that's kind of sad in the way that you feel bad for serial killers with a traumatic childhood where you're like, I don't feel bad for you, but I see why you are the way you are. It was that kind of feeling where you're a little empathetic, but you're still like, I hope you die. But empathetically, I hope you die, where you're just like, my emotions are here.
Yeah.
But also, goodbye.
I felt so connected to Louise because that would 100% be me in that situation. And it's so funny to read because I was of two minds while reading it. Half of me was like, oh my God, light that house on fire and walk away. Yeah. But also, if this were my life, I would 100% be the one going, there's no such thing as ghosts. There's no such thing as possessed puppets. Y'all are being crazy. Let's get in the house and clean it up and stop acting nuts. And everyone else would be like, the puppet's going to kill me. And I'd go, that's crazy. Puppets don't kill. And then meanwhile, and I'd keep forcing logic onto the situation until the puppet stabbed me in the eyeball.
Right. 100%. I feel like I would hire someone. If this was me, I would be like, let me hire someone to clean all these puppets out and then burn them, please. And then I would feel okay going in. But knowing that a puppet is lurking in my house is pretty much a reason to never return, I think.
No, there's nothing in that house I want, ever.
Literally not. I like stuff, but I like having an eyeball much more than I like stuff.
Yeah.
So, goodbye.
Did this book ruin the Velveteen Rabbit for you? Because I'm a little mad about that, too.
Already that book is kind of sad, right?
It's sad, but it's not as terrible as this book makes it out.
Yeah, no, it's not. But it is already, once you think about it, you really think about it, you're like, huh, okay. This is actually kind of, a lot of children's books actually are kind of sad and depressing. And, the more you think about it, you're like, man, the other day I read Corduroy I haven't read Corduroy since I was little. And someone put it in my little free library. So I read it and it's like, the bear's alone. Nobody loves him. He has no support system. And you're just like, why would you read this to a kid? That's so depressing. So I think going back and re-examining things from your childhood, you come back with a different reaction as an adult than you did as a child.
Yeah. Mine is The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. It's the worst book. I hate that book. I've always hated it.
I agree with you. Have you read the parody, The Taking Tree?
No. No.
Someone wrote a parody and it's the same exact drawings, but it's a selfish tree that kicks the boy and grabs his stuff. And I'm like, yeah, go tree. You go.
Fine. Yeah. And the way that is always presented as this is what motherhood is just literally giving without thanks until you're dead. I don't think it's healthy for anybody.
Yeah. You're like, what is Shel Silverstein's mother like? Yeah. I feel like maybe he should have appreciated her more because the fact that book came out, I'm like, there's therapy for that, Please get some.
I thought about The Giving Tree a lot as I was reading How to Sell a Haunted House because, Louise's mother ruins Velveteen Rabbit and ruins all puppets.
Yeah.
And is a bit of a crazy mother anyway. And
a bit. The squirrels she glued on. She made a squirrel nativity out of dead squirrels. You don't think that's a bit weird?
It's a bit weird. I was trying to be nice because I don't believe in mom shaming, but she's a little.
It's nothing about her being a mom. It's her as a person.
It's her as a person.
Her bad choices and being interested in puppets. It's not about being a mom. She's just a freak that loves puppets, and I hate that.
And didn't you know, right? I mean, this is not a spoiler. Those squirrels show up fairly early on. And right when they show up, I thought, oh God, we know those squirrels are coming back.
Yeah, those squirrels are not gone. Like,
no.
Please beware of squirrels.
Check off squirrels. They're for sure coming back. And I'm never looking at squirrels the same way again.
I already hated squirrels. And now I'm like, I would have never gone near a dead squirrel in the first place. But now for sure, no.
I mean, is this what's going to happen to all my shit though? Like all my kids are going to go through.
Yeah.
And I think my hobbies are innocent and they're going to be going through it. Like, God, mom was psycho. I mean, I don't have taxidermied squirrels, but I have a lot of craft supplies.
Yeah. You should probably get rid of it
should.
As you get older, slowly throw that stuff away so they won't go through it and be like, why do you have this?
Yeah.
You know, like when I'm old, I'm going to get rid of all my murder books. So my kids aren't like, huh. I'm just going to be like, I'm only going to read, I don't know what normal people read.
Oh, romances.
No,
I
won't read.
You're not going to do that. No, here's what we'll do. No, listen, I got it. Since I read so many romance and lit fic, I'm going to start giving you the dust jackets, right?
Oh, perfect.
So then you just cover all of your terrifying murder books with these, the Lady and the Duke dust jackets. And
honestly, what's worse though? I don't want my kids to think that I like 16th century sexualized ankle, like that's weird.
16th century sexualized ankles are awesome.
I don't think so. I think that that's weirder. I would rather them think I like serial killers than like someone's corset being slowly undone. Like that's real weird. Like that's actually weird. Murder's fine, but like
murder's fine.
A candle slowly burning down is weird.
Oh my God, you and I are such different readers. This moment right here, this is precisely why I started this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, there's something for everybody, right? So-
yes, and thank goodness for that. Now, did you know that Grady Hendrix has a podcast also?
I did not know that.
I'm not sure that it's active. It's called Super Scary Haunted Homeschool, which is...
Love that.
I love that title. Mm-hmm. But it looks like it was regular for a while and then stopped for a long time. And then when I just went and looked at it before we talked, and there's been one recent one. So maybe he's just restarted it. I'm not sure.
Love that.
But I feel like, I am never going to listen ever.
Sure.
But I kind of have a feeling it would be a lot of fun.
I'm going to listen. So I'll let you know because that sounds amazing.
Yeah. Honestly. It's about the history of horror as from what I read. That. Not that that's I listened.
Super interesting. And I wouldn't know anything about that. So I think that would be cool to learn about. Because
there is a delineation between thriller and horror.
Yeah.
What would you say is the difference?
I think for horror, it's more for shock value and it's more about the gruesome details, and thriller's more about the story where you're like going through the journey. That's my opinion, just based on reading it. Horror is more, they do have a lot of deep meanings, but it's more about like the shock and the gruesome violence, where thrillers are more, I think, at least the ones I read, are a lot more psychological and less violent.
Where do you put this one? How to Sell a Haunted House?
It's a horror. It's a psychological horror. That's what I would put it.
Yeah, and it felt very sort of 80s horror, 80s or early 90s horror movie, which was the other thing that kept me listening, was the sort of campiness of it.
Yes. I love
it. Ultimately, if you are an anxious soul, as I am, you do sit there and go, okay, dolls chasing you around is very silly. Yeah. And that did help.
It's less scary. It's less scary because when I don't like reading things that could be real. So, especially in horror. So I don't like reading about someone being possessed. Like, that's not for me, because I'm like, that's probably real, right? Like, people can be possessed by things. So a puppet that's just walking around, I'm like, probably not. I mean,
Probably couldn't happen.
if it happened, I would be shocked. So I'm not that scared as I maybe should be. Are puppets alive? I don't know. But I would say I'm less scared with things that I feel like are not real than things that are real, which is why I say a lot of thrillers actually freak me out, because serial killers are a thing and haunted puppets are probably not a thing.
Is it like some part of you wants to prepare yourself?
Yes.
Is that part of the thing? Is like, now I know how to handle it. If this kind of serial killer comes at me, I know what. Are you serious?
I think through that all the time. I'm always prepared for someone to abduct me, constantly. Just like I travel for work and I'm constantly prepared for a terrorist to take our plane. Always. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. Every time I get in a plane, I'm like, this is my 4 steps. And I do the same thing with when I read thrillers. I'm like, 100%. If a guy walks behind me, I'm going to do this. If someone grabs my arm, I'm going to do this. I always have that running through my head. You know, if someone tries to get me to roll down my car window and say my tire's flat, who cares? They can fuck right off.
Well, I never thought of it like that before. Maybe I think my approach to life is all wrong.
And that's okay too. You know, like, I think that's a less anxious way to live your life, is to not be prepared to be abducted. But I'm prepared. Even if someone's just politely being like, your taillight's out, punch to the throat. And then say, oh, thank you, sir, after I punch him in the throat.
Thank you for being such a good citizen. I apologize for stabbing you in the eyeballs.
Sorry that you're a single white man walking around. That's on you.
That's really your own fault. Absolutely.
Yeah. The patriarchy has enough going on, pros. So if they get punched in the throat once in a while, too bad, you know?
It's just a consequence.
Yeah.
I had no idea that deep diving into thrillers was going to make me appreciate life so much more. But you're absolutely right. It's a very positive outlook on life.
Yeah, you got to be positive about murder. You can't just think of the negatives.
Yeah. You have changed my life outlook, Chelsea Hofman. This is incredible.
I do what I can,
Thank you.
One person at a time.
Okay. Tell me what some thrillers that you're looking forward to coming up in the new year.
So many. There's
so many.
Some of the ones that I'm most looking forward to are The Last Word by Taylor Adams, which is going to be very good. It's about someone who leaves a bad review online and then the author hunts them down.
Oh my God.
That's right. Crazy. So good.
It was only a matter of time before an author wrote that one.
Right. That's probably how all authors feel, I'm guessing. So yeah. Also, The Only One Left by Riley Sager, his new book that's coming out in June, looks amazing. There's going to be a new Ruth Ware. It's called 0 Days that's coming out. There's a new Lisa Jewell called None of This Is True. And Catherine Ryan Howard has The Trap, and Samantha Downing has A Twisted Love Story. Yeah, so there's a ton of new thrillers coming out from all my favorite authors. So summer's going to be amazing.
So tell me what's on your nightstand right now. What are you in the middle of?
So right now I'm halfway through What Remains by Wendy Walker, which is coming out probably, I think, in June. And that book I'm halfway through. It's really good. It's about a police officer who is in like a Bed Bath & Beyond type place, and there's a shooting, and she takes out the shooter to save a man who's about to be shot. So she, shoots him. And then the man goes out, whatever. And then right now in the book, she can't find him anywhere. He's not like a real person. The name he gave is fake. The information he has is not real. She can't find him with his address. And so he just kind of disappeared. And she's not sure. He obviously is hiding something because it's like a ghost trail. And so the guy she saved now is very suspicious.
Okay. I can tell you right now that I'm 100% not going to be reading this book, but I cannot wait to hear what you think.
What if I choose it for book club?
I'm gonna do what I do almost every month, which is show up and order fancy coffee and listen to you all talk. And
cool.
And
okay,
go.
That's fine. No,
I love these women.
Our April book, you can read it. It's not scary.
What is it?
The Soulmate.
Are you allowed to say?
I'll say, yeah. It's The Soulmate by Sally Hepworth, and it's
I like Sally
cozy.
Hepworth.
Yeah, it's more cozy. It's not scary. It's a mystery, but it's not scary. So there's at least one you can read.
Okay. Thank you for throwing me a bone
You're
every
welcome.
6 months. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
and even when you don't, I love being around bookish women. So
it's fine. You'll suffer.
It's fine. I go for the company and then I come home and I go, sure glad I didn't read that one.
Right. And that's fine. I support it, honestly. You don't have to.
Thank God. Thank God. Well, someday I'm going to get you to come to a romance book club and I'm just going to get you fancy coffees and you can sit there and go, thank God I didn't read that shit.
I probably wouldn't even go for cash. So good luck. Honestly, you could not pay me to hear about. I just do not care. I just don't care. My brain just turns right off. It's just, even with like romantic comedy movies, I'm like, well, good thing I can text throughout this movie because I could not care less. Literally.
Okay.
Maybe. You never know.
You never know. It's gonna be a goal in life to find you one that will actually hold your interest. But it by definition, it has to be one where they don't wind up together. And therefore it's not a romance.
Something truly horrible happens
or
that
someone's
shocks
decapitated.
you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Decapitation's always good.
Yeah. I don't think this book is out there, but
okay.
We'll think about it.
Yeah.
Chelsea, I want to thank you for joining me today. I think talking to you about books is one of my great pleasures in life. And I hope you'll come back anytime you have a book you want to tell me about.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Bookworms, I would love to hear if you've read any Grady Hendrix books and what you thought of them. I'm kind of inclined to read another one because I really did enjoy this one, believe it or not. But also, I probably should not push my luck, right? Yeah. Let me know what you think over on Instagram at Best Book Ever Podcast. Links to everything Chelsea and I discussed are available on the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to the new weekly pod newsletter at bestbookeverpodcast.substack.com. Thank you for joining me today. And as always, I will see you at the library.